Hello everyone, my name is Seth, and today I'm going to give you my review of The Edge of Sleep. We're continuing the horror/thriller theme kind of leading up to October, and I wanted to talk about The Edge of Sleep. It is a new series that came out on Amazon. It actually stars the YouTuber Markiplier, and it is based on a podcast by the same name. Markiplier is one of my favorite YouTubers, and so back when I heard he was going to be doing a voice in a podcast, I was immediately interested. I had to listen to it right away, and I really enjoyed the podcast. And so whenever he announced that they were going to be making The Edge of Sleep into a live-action show, then I was definitely super excited for that. It actually took a while for it to come out, but it finally came out last week, and I watched it immediately. But before we go any farther, go ahead and like this video, hit subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a video. We are on the road to 300 subscribers. We're getting closer and closer, so if you're new here, please subscribe. And if you're not new here, share this video with your friends, with your family. It'll help the channel grow, and it'll absolutely make my day. First off, I just want to say that I really enjoyed this series. I think I liked it more than I enjoyed the podcast. I think the idea that they have here is just such a good idea. We follow Dave, who is played by Markiplier, who is a night watchman, and he finishes his shift at work, and then he's terrified to discover that everyone in the world who went to sleep the previous night has died. Now, he and a small group of survivors must stay awake to uncover the secret of this global epidemic before they fall asleep. And I think this idea gets your attention right from the beginning. It just keeps you asking what's going to happen next. It does a great job of kind of bringing up these big questions and then maybe answering some of them while also bringing up some more questions. I think for this series, the only big issue in terms of the storytelling I have is that from time to time it feels a little rushed. Each episode is about 20, 21 minutes to maybe about 25, 26 minutes, in that range. So sometimes I think you kind of feel the episode length impact the storytelling just a little bit. Plus the season is only 6 episodes as a whole. So sometimes I feel like we go over things a little bit too quick. I wish we could kind of slow down a little bit, sit with the characters in these different circumstances. But the way that they are able to tell this story in kind of the limited time that they have is pretty impressive. They got across a lot of story and kind of a lot of big concepts in honestly not that much time. So they absolutely used the time that they had very well. It's just occasionally it feels rushed, and that kind of stands out to me. But if I had to take a guess, I would say that that's more of kind of a studio thing. That's more of a studio mandate, not necessarily 100% on the creators. And if I'm not mistaken, I think they changed a few things from the podcast. Now, forgive me if I'm wrong, because it's been a while since I've listened to the podcast. But if I remember correctly, they've changed a few things from the podcast, and I think the changes are for the better. I think the ending here is a bit different from the ending of the podcast, and I think that's definitely a positive, because the ending of the podcast was one of the things I kind of had issues with. I was talking about how sometimes it feels rushed. Well, I think the ending for the podcast felt super rushed. It kind of felt like we were just thrown into something, and it just kind of felt like a clash of ideas. It was just so quick. They asked you to accept a lot of information very quickly, and I think that they adjusted and they were able to better fit the ending for kind of the rest of the story that they were telling. They landed the ending here better than at least what I remember the ending being in the podcast. And I think when you're adapting something, that's exactly what you should do. You should take the things that worked and probably expand upon them. But also, if you have some things in the original that, maybe didn't work quite as well, take this time in the adaptation to try to improve on them. And they did that here. I think it helps that the original creative team behind the podcast is kind of the creative team behind the show. So I think that's a lot of fun, kind of getting to see them expand a little bit and tweak a few things on the original work. So I think the ending here is not quite as rushed as the ending in the podcast. And I think the ending also kind of ties in to the rest of the story better in the show than in the podcast. It just does a better job of tying in some of these more abstract and complex themes. But speaking of kind of some abstract things, I think from time to time the show can get a little bit too abstract for its own good, but they don't necessarily linger on those moments too long. So I do think more of the abstract things make more sense in the show than they did in the podcast. We don't really dive real deep into any of these characters, maybe other than Dave, our main character, played by Markiplier. I feel like if we had more time, we could, dive in a little bit deeper to some of the other characters we follow, other than kind of some surface level lines here or there that kind of reveals a little bit more of their backstory. I really like the cinematography in this show. Some of the shots are just really pretty, especially some of the shots that go really wide of some of like the cityscapes, or where it just shows how kind of alone these characters are, or even in the dream worlds, sometimes when they go really wide, you really get to see the location that they're at. It just looks really good. And they do a couple things here and there just to kind of elevate the cinematography from just being boring and standard. I also love the use of color in this series. They do a great job of having color influence how you feel, and also signaling if we're in like a dream world or different things like that. Honestly, I think even the normal color grading looks really good just when they're out there in the city and you see some trees like in a neighborhood or something. Those just really pop, and it just is a visually pleasing show. So I've already mentioned that Markiplier is one of my favorite YouTubers. So I guess you could say maybe I'm a little bit biased here. So I guess take that as you will. But I was very impressed by Markiplier's performance in this show. I think he did a really, really good job. I think he's done a good job playing different characters on his channel, whether it be something kind of like in Space with Markiplier or a Heist with Markiplier, just some of the other different characters he's done just throughout the years. But often that was more comedic. And even though he did a good job with some of those characters on his channel, it did lean mostly comedic. So I was very interested to see how he would do in just a straight up drama or thriller. And I think he definitely impressed me. In the show, he's not a YouTuber. He's not Markiplier. He's an actor playing a role. And I think he does that very well. I always say that a sign of a good performance is when the actor is able to connect with the audience and make you believe the character kind of no matter what circumstances they may be put in. I think he nails the bigger moments that his character has, but he also nails just like the smaller, kind of everyday conversations. I think he honestly adds a lot of little details to her performance that just help kind of flesh out the role. I think probably one of the biggest compliments I could give is that he just seemed like a natural to me. At one point, Markiplier just kind of faded away and I was just watching the character of Dave. And it didn't seem like he was a YouTuber among actors. He just fit in seamlessly. I also really liked Franz Drame's performance. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. I've never actually heard his last name pronounced, so forgive me if I'm wrong on that. But I really enjoyed seeing him in The Flash and in Legends of Tomorrow. But I think his performance here is better than anything he did in the CW shows. This is the first thing I've seen him in since then, and I think he's grown as an actor. He's a little bit more of a comedic relief character, and he plays that really well, and his performance never feels out of place, even when he's doing something a little bit more comedic. Leo Tipton and Eve Harlow play the other two of the four main characters that we really focus on, and they both do a great job as well. I've never seen them in anything before now, but I think they did a great job. The chemistry that all four of these actors have together really helps add to the success of the show. We spend a lot of time with these four, so if the performances or if the chemistry just isn't quite right, that would definitely stick out like a sore thumb, and everything works so seamlessly. They have great chemistry. All the performances were good. There's no complaints from me in this department. The last thing I'll mention is some of the visual effects in this show. I think the practical effects that they have look really good. Any kind of builds that they have to make for the set, or any kind of prosthetics that they end up using look great. I think in terms of visual effects, the biggest weakness is the CGI, and I almost feel like the filmmakers anticipated that being a weakness. The CGI took me out maybe a couple of times, but the filmmakers did a great job of not letting it be CGI heavy during some of the more important or impactful moments, so that didn't really take away anything. Honestly, I've loved The Edge of Sleep. I liked it more than I did the podcast. The story is a lot of fun, and it makes for a great kind of mystery thriller that really hooks you right from the beginning. I think the creative team did a great job of adapting the original podcast to a live-action series. I do wish we had a little bit more time in the episodes, or even in the season as a whole, so we got to spend a little bit more time with the characters and just maybe smooth out the pacing a little bit. But the performances by everybody were really good, and I was honestly impressed with Markiplier's performance. It makes me even that much more excited for Iron Lung. I think the technical filmmaking here was just really well done, very solid all throughout, and I'm going to be recommending this show to anybody who is in the mood to watch a kind of mystery thriller show. And I'm hoping that this does well enough that we could possibly get to see more from this world or more from these characters. I had a really good time with The Edge of Sleep. I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5. But that's it. That's my review of The Edge of Sleep. Have you seen this show? Let me know what you thought about it in the comment section down below. I'd love to have a conversation with you about it. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a video. You can follow me on social media pretty much anywhere at CinemaSeth, and I'll see you next time.